Ian Murray, the EU referendum was more than a year ago. Jeremy Corbyn set out his stall on Brexit last week. Why are you launching your pressure group now?
Well, Scottish Labour for the single market is essentially a way of trying to persuade both the Labour Party leadership but the wider country that it's in the country's best interest to stay in the single market and the customs union. We all know we're leaving the European Union, but if we're leaving the EU, we should take the least worst option, and all the analysis shows that the least worst option is to stay in the single market and the customs union. That would protect jobs, it would protect the economy, and it would certainly make sure that future prosperity would be at least guaranteed in the short term.
It would give you absolutely no say, though.
Well, this is about the economy and about future jobs. There is no doubt that all the analysis shows in a Scottish context that at the very least staying in the single market and the customs union would mean that GDP wouldn't grow by 2%. If we fall out of the EU and the customs union and the single market on World Trade Organization rules, the economy could suffer to the tune of about 9%. That's a huge number of jobs, it's a huge amount of income, and it certainly jeopardises the future prosperity of the country. So this is the least worst option. It's not ideal, but it's the way the country should go, and we should be supporting it.
So why do it now, though, to go back to my first question, after Jeremy Corbyn has already outlined the party's position?
Well, there is a UK Labour for the single market that was launched some time ago, and the reason we've launched this now is because we think the timing in terms of where we've got to as a party is the right time to do it. The negotiations with the EU at UK government level have to conclude around October. That is 21 months today that we're on from the referendum, and the government doesn't look as if it's moved on at all. And indeed, the Prime Minister's speech at the Mansion House on Friday, and indeed her statement in the House of Commons today, it showed that they've still got no idea of how to take this forward. And the EU are correct when they say that the red lines the government have set themselves mean that that's incompatible with what they want to achieve. The way to answer all of these questions is to stay in the single market and the customs union. I very much welcome Jeremy's speech from a few weeks ago where he committed to a customs union, but you can't really have the customs union without the single market. You would get regulatory divergence, which would mean that you couldn't sell your components or your cars or your instruments
okay,
abroad
but you would also get... You would also get freedom of movement, and a key factor in the movement, in the vote to leave the EU, was immigration. How would you deal with that?
Well, let's start from the correct proviso, and the correct proviso is that immigration has been very positive for the UK. Yes, the change on some communities has been too fast, too soon, but that's something that public policy it has to address. We need freedom of movement to bring in the best scientists, to bring in the soft fruit prickers that the Conservative MP Christine Hare
that argument's been put forward, but is it not fair to say that part of the reason that people voted to leave, a majority of people in the UK voted to leave the EU, part of the reason certainly was immigration?
Well, of course it was part of the reason, but we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here, and we want to make sure that if we're leaving the EU, which is what people voted for, we take the least worst option. With the Norway option, if I can put it that way, in terms of the single market, you can have some restrictions and some transitional arrangements over immigration. You can put together a package of measures and present that to the EU to protect your economy. Norway have done that, and incidentally, Norway signed up to the Schengen Agreement, so they wanted a bit more of a liberal approach to immigration. So we have to address these issues head on, but let's not cut our nose off to spite our face here and leave the single market and the customs union, which would mean that the country would be in a much worse place. Nobody voted in the EU referendum to be poorer, and this is the least worst option to make you less poor than you would have been have you take any other option like World Trade Organization rules, or indeed where the government are currently going.
You've been accused of undermining both the UK and the Scottish leadership by Pat Rafferty, among others. Is that what you're doing?
No, absolutely not. This has got nothing to do with the leadership of the UK or Scottish Labour parties. This is about we're trying to do what is best for the country here, and the single market.
But it's at odds, though, with the leadership of both the UK and Scottish parties, isn't it?
Well, it's always the grassroots that have to put pressure on parties of all colours, whether it be Labour or the Conservatives, to change the policy to try and do the right thing. Jeremy's moved quite significantly towards the customs union in the last couple of weeks. We just need to nudge him a little bit further to move him towards a single market, and then we can all campaign across the House, across party, to make sure that we can get those numbers in the House of Commons to get the single market and the customs union, and try and stop the significant damage that would be done to this country if we don't take that avenue.
Finally, and briefly, if you will, what makes you think that party members at the conference will support you?
Well, this is a grassroots organisation. We've had constituency Labour parties putting in motions to conference, and we've seen opinion poll after opinion poll shows that the Labour Party membership want the single market and the customs union. We should be listening to them and doing what's in the best interest of the country.
Ian Murray, thanks for joining us in Scotland tonight.
My pleasure.